There's something about the Old West that speaks to the soul, not the Hollywood version with its shootouts and saloons, but the quieter truth beneath, the truth about second chances, about folks who'd stumbled and found their feet again on unforgiving ground, about ordinary courage that didn't come with fanfare, just a choice made in a dusty moment that changed everything. This is one of those stories. It happened in a time when a man's word still meant something, when shame could be worn as publicly as Sunday clothes, and when kindness, real kindness, could cost you everything you'd built. It's about Wyatt Sands and Clara Brennan, two people the world had written off, who wrote themselves a different ending. If you've ever felt like you were standing alone in a crowd, this story is for you. The 2:15 from Cheyenne was late. Wyatt Sands stood in the shade of the depot overhang, barbed wire crate at his feet, watching heat shimmer off the rails. The cicadas were screaming in the cottonwoods. His shirt stuck to his back. He'd been in Millerton 2 hours too long. Town made his skin crawl these days. All those eyes that wouldn't quite meet his but watched just the same. The whistle cut through the afternoon heat, distant and lonesome. Folks on the platform stirred. Mrs. Pettigrew adjusted her parasol. The station master came out, squinting at his pocket watch like it had personally offended him. Wyatt stayed where he was, hat brim low, watching the horizon where the black smoke rolled up against the hard blue sky. The Union Pacific chugged in with a screech of brakes and a blast of steam that sent the dogs scattering. Coal smoke drifted across the platform, bitter and thick. 5 passengers stepped down. A drummer with his sample case, an old woman in black, woman in 2 cowboys heading for the ranches west of town. And her. She came last. One hand gripping the rail, the other clutching a carpet bag that had seen better days. Her dress was calico. Blue flowers faded to the color of old bruises. The straw bonnet on her head had a broken ribbon that hung down like something defeated. She stepped onto the platform and stopped, looking around with the kind of careful hope that hurt to watch. A man pushed through the small crowd. Hiram Cadell, who owned the feed store and thought that made him important. He stopped 3 feet from her, thumbs hooked in his vest, and looked her up and down like she was a horse he was thinking of buying. "You Clara Brennan." Her chin came up. "I am. Turn around." Wyatt's hands tightened on the crate handle. Around him, folks were starting to gather. This was better than church-free entertainment on a Sunday afternoon. Mrs. Pettigrew had that look on her face, the one that said she was storing up gossip like a squirrel storing nuts. The woman Clara stood there for a long moment. Then she turned slowly. A full circle, her face burning red, but her spine straight as a lodgepole pine. Cadell spat tobacco juice into the dust near her feet. Not on her, but close enough that the meaning was clear. "You bring the dowry letter said $500 and a Singer sewing machine." "My father passed." Her voice was quiet but steady. "There's nothing but, then you ain't worth the price of your ticket." The crowd made that sound, that ugly little hum of satisfaction that people make when they're watching someone else's misery and feeling grateful it ain't theirs. Clara's chin trembled, just once, then she bent and reached for her carpet bag. Cadell kicked it. The bag tumbled off the platform into the dust below. Contents spilling. A threadbare chemise, a tintype in a cracked frame, a Bible with a worn leather cover, a wooden sewing box that broke open, scattering spools of thread that rolled across the dirt like little wheels of shame. The crowd laughed. Wyatt set down his crate. "Shameful," Mrs. Pettigrew announced, loud enough for the whole territory to hear. "Leading a man on like that." Clara knelt in the dust, gathering her things with shaking hands. She tried to fold the chemise, but her fingers wouldn't work right. A spool of thread rolled past her, and she lunged for it. And that's when one of the men spoke up. "She's pretty enough for other work. Silver Dollar's always hiring." More laughter. Clara's face went white. The silver dollar. Everyone knew what that meant. She got the chemise folded. Somehow. And stuffed it back in the bag, along with the tintype and the Bible. The sewing box was broken, pieces of it scattered, but she gathered what she could. Her hands were shaking so hard, the thread spools kept slipping through her fingers. "I ordered goods," Cadell said, voice carrying across the platform. "Got damaged freight." The station master looked away. The cowboys studied their boots. Mrs. Pettigrew's daughter tried to step forward, but her mother's hand clamped on her arm. "Girls these days got no shame," Mrs. Pettigrew said. Clara stood up, carpetbag clutched against her chest. She looked at Cadell. "I have nothing but myself, sir. That was the agreement. Agreement's void. Find your own way back east." The train whistle blew 10 minutes till departure. "I don't have return fare." Cadell shrugged. "Ain't my problem." He turned and walked away. Just like that. Left her standing there in the sun, with her broken sewing box and her shame on display for everyone to see. The crowd started to break up. Murmuring, shaking their heads, the show was over. Wyatt picked up his crate and walked forward. Every eye turned to him. The murmuring stopped. Mrs. Pettigrew's mouth fell open. He set the crate down and removed his hat. "I'll take her." The silence was so complete you could hear the telegraph key clicking inside the station office, could hear the train hissing, could hear Clara's sharp intake of breath. Sheriff Burrell took a step forward. "Wyatt, you ain't exactly the marrying kind. Didn't say marry, said I'd take her, if she'll come." He looked at Clara for the first time. Her face was streaked with dust and tear tracks. Her eyes were the color of creek water, and they were staring at him like he'd just sprouted wings. "You need a place," he said. "I got one." "I don't," her voice cracked. "I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. Why would you need help or not?" She looked at him, looked at the crowd, looked at the train that would carry her back to nothing, looked at Cadell's retreating back. "Yes," she whispered. Wyatt bent and started gathering her scattered belongings, the broken sewing box, the spools of thread, the tintype of two stern-faced people who must have been her parents. He handed them to her one by one, not looking at the crowd, not looking at anything but the work his hands were doing. When everything was gathered, he picked up her carpetbag, 40 pounds. Maybe. It had weight to it. He offered his other hand. She stared at it, at his calloused palm. Rope-scarred and steady, she took it. Her hand was soft, small, shaking. "This way," he said. They walked through the crowd. People stepped back like they were contagious. Wyatt didn't look at any of them, kept his eyes forward, kept walking, kept his hand steady so she could hold on. His buckboard was hitched at the rail. Buck, his dun gelding, flicked an ear at them. Wyatt helped Clara up onto the seat, then lifted her bag into the back. The barbed wire crate could wait. Let Holcomb deliver it later. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. Sinful, Mrs. Pettigrew said. Loud and clear. Wyatt looked at her. Just looked. Said nothing. Clicked his tongue, and Buck moved forward. The wagon wheels creaked. The crowd parted. They rolled out of town. The prairie stretched in every direction, endless and gold. Pronghorn grazed in the distance. Hawks circled overhead. The sun beat down and the wagon rattled over the ruts left by freight wagons and spring rains. 3 miles passed. Neither of them spoke. At the 4th mile, Clara said, "Why?" Wyatt kept his eyes on the road. "Seemed like you needed help. You don't know me. Know enough." Another mile of silence. Then, "What do you want from me? Nothing you ain't willing to give." She turned and looked at him. Really looked. His face was weathered, lined around the eyes. His jaw was tight. His hands on the reins were steady. There was a Bible on the seat between them. Bookmark at Psalms 23. His fingernails were clean, which was strange for a rancher. "I can't be what you... ain't asking you to be anything." "Then what? Cabin small, 1 room, I'll sleep on the floor." She went quiet again, watched the prairie roll by. Finally, "Why would you do this?" Wyatt was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "I know what it's like to be judged." The wagon crested a low hill, and there it was a cabin. Small and weathered. Smoke rising from the chimney. Cattle grazed nearby. A garden patch showed green against the brown grass. Clara's breath caught. It was real. "That's home," Wyatt said. The word hung in the air between them, fragile as spun glass. Home. If you're reading this on a porch somewhere, maybe with a glass of tea sweating in your hand, maybe with the evening light slanting just so I hope it's treating you kind. The cabin door swung inward on leather hinges. Wyatt stepped aside and Clara walked past him into the dimness. 1 room, 14 feet by 16. Maybe. Stone fireplace on the far wall with embers glowing orange. Rope bed in the corner. Corn husk mattress visible under a gray wool blanket. Pine table with 2 chairs. Wash tub hanging on a nail. Shelves holding tins without labels. A Winchester rifle over the mantel that hadn't been touched in so long. Dust filmed the barrel. The air smelled like wood smoke and coffee grounds and old sweat. "Ain't much," Wyatt said behind her. Clara set her carpetbag down. Her hand stayed on the handle. "You take the bed." Wyatt moved past her to the fireplace. "I'll sleep here." He pointed to the floor. Bare planks, gaps showing between them where wind would come through in winter. "That's your bed." "Was." He dragged a bedroll from under the bed wool blanket. Saddle for a pillow. Dropped it by the fire. "Ain't proper now." Clara's throat worked. She looked at the bed, at the floor, at Wyatt's back as he bent to add wood to the coals. "I can't take, already decided." The wood caught. Flames licked up yellow and bright. Shadows jumped across the walls. On the mantel was a daguerreotype, in a tin frame, a woman with a stern face and eyes like Wyatt's. Clara pulled off her bonnet. Her hair was stuck to her scalp with sweat and dust. She sat on the edge of the bed. The rope creaked under her weight. She still wore her traveling dress. Wrinkled and stained from kneeling in the dirt, Wyatt stayed facing the fire. "There's a pump out back," he said. "Water's clean, cold." She nodded, then realized he couldn't see her. "Thank you." He didn't answer. Clara lay down without undressing, stared at the ceiling where smoke stains made patterns like dark continents on a map. The mattress rustled with every breath she took. Loud, too loud. She tried to breathe quieter. Wyatt spread his blanket on the floor, used the saddle as a pillow, lay on his back with his hands folded on his chest. The fire crackled. Outside, a coyote yipped in the distance, and another answered. Clara's eyes burned, but she didn't close them, just stared at the ceiling and listened to Wyatt breathing 3 feet away. His breath was slow, steady, the rhythm of a man used to sleeping alone. But something about it wasn't quite even, wasn't quite right. He was awake, too. The fire popped, a log settled. She turned her head slightly on the mattress, could just see his profile in the firelight. His jaw was tight, his eyes were open, staring at the rafters above him. Neither of them moved, neither of them spoke. The space between the bed and the floor felt smaller with every breath. Clara's hand rested on the edge of the mattress, 6 inches from where he lay. She didn't move it. The fire burned lower. Outside, something rustled in the grass near the cabin wall. A mouse, maybe, or something bigger. The rooster's crow split the darkness. Clara's eyes snapped open. Gray light seeped through the gaps in the shutters. The fire had burned down to white ash. Her dress was twisted around her legs, damp with sweat. The bedroll by the fireplace was empty. She sat up. The mattress ropes creaked. Outside, she could hear the low murmur of a man's voice and the soft answering sound of cattle, Wyatt, talking to his stock. Clara swung her feet to the floor. The boards were cold. She still wore her boots. She stood, and her spine cracked, moved to the window and looked out through the gap in the shutters. Wyatt stood by the fence, pitchfork in hand, forking hay to 6 Hereford cattle. Their white faces turned toward him as he worked. He moved with the efficiency of a man who'd done this 10,000 times. No wasted motion. His shirt was already dark with sweat across the shoulders. Clara turned from the window, looked at the cabin in daylight. Shelves lined one wall. Tins jumbled together coffee next to beans next to something that might have been sugar but had no label. A skillet hung from a nail. Grease dried black on the rim. Tin plates stacked crooked. 2 cups. The Winchester over the mantel. Dust thick enough to write in. She opened her carpet bag, pulled out the tintype of her parents, set it on the mantel next to the daguerreotype of Wyatt's mother. The 2 stern faces stared at each other across the stone. She found the remains of her sewing box, most of it broken. But the thread spools had survived. She set them on the table, white, black, brown, blue. The shelf bothered her. She reached up and pulled down the first tin, opened it. Coffee arbuckles from the smell. She set it aside. Next tin. Beans. Next. Sugar. Mixed with something that might have been salt. She found a scrap of old newspaper and ink that had gone to sludge in its bottle. Mixed it with soot from the fireplace until it was thin enough to write with. Used a stick for a pen. Coffee on the first tin. Beans on the second. Sugar on the third. The door opened behind her. Clara turned. Wyatt stood in the doorway, pitchfork still in hand. He looked at her, at the organized shelf, at the newspaper labels. Didn't have to do that. Hands needed work. He leaned the pitchfork against the wall, closed the door, moved to the water bucket, and dipped his hands in, scrubbed them together, dried them on his pants. "Obliged," he said. Clara nodded, turned back to the shelf. Her fingers were black with soot ink. "Found labels in your—" She stopped. "Found paper? Hope that's all right?" "It's fine." Silence. Clara pulled down more tins, kept working. Behind her, Wyatt moved to the fireplace and began building up the fire. The scratch of flint on steel, the soft whoosh of kindling catching. Clara's hand touched something under the shelf edge, a loose board. She pressed it. It shifted. She glanced back at Wyatt. He was bent over the fire, his back to her. She lifted the board. Oilcloth, wrapped around something heavy. The shape was unmistakable. Clara's breath stopped in her chest. She stared at it, reached down and touched the cloth. It was soft with oil, old. The gun beneath it was cold even through the fabric. She put the board back, exactly as it had been, turned and continued labeling tins like nothing had happened, when the fire was going. Wyatt stood. "I'll fetch water. You need— I can make coffee." He looked at her. "All right." He took the bucket and went out. The door closed behind him. Clara's hands shook as she measured coffee into the pot. She'd found the hand crank mill on a nail by the door. The beans rattled in the hopper. She cranked, and the mechanism ground them down. The sound loud in the quiet cabin. The smell of fresh coffee rose up. Sharp and clean. She had the pot on the fire when Wyatt came back with water. "Ain't had real coffee in a while," he said. "How long?" 3 years. She poured water from the bucket into the pot. "Why, seemed wasteful, grinding beans for one person." The coffee began to boil. Clara found the cups, rinsed them, poured. The steam rose between them. She handed him a cup. He took it, wrapped both hands around it even though the tin was hot. Drank. His eyes closed. "Your ma teach you?" he asked. "Before she passed?" He opened his eyes, looked at her over the rim of the cup. "I'm sorry." Clara drank her own coffee. It burned her tongue. "Your ma, 10 years ago, fever." They stood there, coffee between them, the fire crackling, morning light growing stronger through the windows. Wyatt set his cup down, moved to a shelf, and pulled down a tin she hadn't labeled yet. Opened it. Inside was something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it. Flour. And in the flour, buried like treasure, a small wooden box. He opened it. Dried yeast. He looked at her. Didn't ask the question. Just stood there holding the box. Clara thought of her mother's kitchen, of Sunday mornings, of the recipe she still carried in her carpet bag. "I can," she said. Clara looked at the wooden box in Wyatt's hand, at the yeast wrapped in cloth, like something precious. Wyatt handed her the box. His fingers brushed hers. Both pulled back. Clara opened her carpet bag and dug to the bottom, found the small leather pouch her mother had given her. Inside was a folded paper with her mother's recipe written in faded ink. She unfolded it on the table. The creases were worn soft as cloth. Wyatt moved to the door. "I'll be out with the stock." The door closed behind him. Clara spread the recipe flat. Flour, yeast, salt, lard, water. Her mother's handwriting slanted to the right. The letters formed with care. At the bottom, in different ink, "Add love, it makes them rise better." Clara's eyes burned. She blinked hard, picked up the flour tin. The skillet needed scrubbing first. She heated water in the kettle, used sand from outside, and a rag to scour off 3 years of burnt grease. Her hands turned red from the hot water. The sand ground under her fingernails. When the skillet was clean, she dried it and rubbed it with lard from a crock she found under the shelf. She mixed the dough in the one bowl she could find. Flour, yeast dissolved in warm water, pinch of salt. Lard worked in with her fingers. The dough was sticky. She kneaded it on the table, adding flour until it stopped sticking to her hands, formed it into a ball, and covered it with a damp cloth. Set it near the fire to rise. While the dough rose, she unpacked. Her mother's quilt came out first. Double wedding ring pattern. Every stitch done by hand. She spread it over the corn husk mattress. The colors were faded, but still bright enough to change the whole room. Blue and white and yellow, where before there'd been only gray. Her sewing kit, what was left of it, went on the shelf. Thread spools lined up by color. 3 needles in a scrap of felt. Scissors with one handle cracked, but still sharp. She had one more dress in the bag. Brown calico, no better than the one she wore. She shook it out and hung it on a nail by the bed. That was everything she owned in the world. Clara looked at the cabin, at what still needed doing. The floor was tracked with mud, mouse droppings in the corner by the woodpile, soot on the inside of the lamp chimney. She found a bucket and filled it from the pump outside. The water was cold enough to make her hands ache. She added a sliver of lye soap and started on the floor, scrubbing on her hands and knees, working from the back of the room toward the door. The lye burned her fingers. The boards were rough, splintery, but they came clean under the brush. Gray water turned black. She dumped it outside and refilled the bucket. Scrubbed more. By the time she reached the door, her back was cramping and her dress was soaked with sweat and dirty water. But the floor was clean. Actually clean. The boards showed their grain for the first time in years. The dough had risen. She punched it down and divided it into 6 pieces, formed them into rounds with her hands, placed them in the skillet, and set it on the fire. While the biscuits baked, she washed out the lamp chimney, trimmed the wick. The glass was cracked, but it would still work. She filled the base with coal oil from the can by the door. The smell of baking bread filled the cabin. Clara stood still for a moment, just breathing. It smelled like home, like her mother's kitchen on Sunday mornings, like something that mattered. The door opened. Wyatt stopped on the threshold. He looked at the floor, at the quilt on the bed, at the organized shelves, at Clara standing by the fire with flour on her hands and her dress soaked dark with scrub water. You didn't have to do all this. Had to do something. He came in slowly, closed the door, walked across the clean floor in his boots, and stopped. Looked down at the mud he'd just tracked in. It's fine. Floor's for walking on. But he bent and unlaced his boots anyway, pulled them off and set them by the door. Stood there in his socks, looking uncomfortable. The biscuits were browning. Clara wrapped her hand in a rag and pulled the skillet off the fire. Set it on the table. The biscuits steamed. She had no butter, no honey, nothing to put on them. Just bread. Wyatt sat down at the table. Clara sat across from him. She put 3 biscuits on his plate, took one for herself. He picked up a biscuit, tore it open. Steam rose from the white inside. He ate slowly, carefully, like he was afraid it might disappear. Clara ate hers. It was good, light. Her mother's recipe had never failed her. Wyatt finished his first biscuit, reached for a second. "They're good," he said. Not a question, just a statement of fact. "Mama's recipe." He ate the second biscuit. She watched his face. It was easier to look at him when he was focused on something else. His jaw was strong, clean-shaven that morning, but already showing stubble. There were lines around his eyes, deep ones. He finished the second biscuit. She pushed the plate toward him. One left. He took it, but didn't eat it right away. Just held it. "My ma made these," he said, "every Sunday, after church." Clara waited. Been 10 years. Still remember the smell. How the kitchen would be warm. How she'd hum while she worked. He looked at the biscuit in his hand, then at Clara. "Thank you," he said. He ate it slowly. When he was done, he sat back and looked at her across the table. Clara stood and started clearing the plates. There was no wash water left, so she went to the pump and filled the bucket again. Her shoulders ached. Her hands were raw from the lye soap, but she pumped the water and carried it inside and heated it on the fire. While the water heated, Wyatt picked up a piece of willow from beside the woodpile, took out his pocket knife and started whittling. The knife moved in small, precise cuts. Shavings curled off onto the table. Clara washed the plates, the cups, the skillet, set them to dry on a cloth by the fire. Her hands were shaking with tiredness. Wyatt kept whittling. The wood was taking shape now. Something with a long handle. A spoon. Maybe. Clara wiped down the table around him. He moved his hands to give her room. The wood was clean now. No crumbs, no dust. She hung the rag to dry, looked at the cabin, at what she'd done in one day. Outside, the sun was setting. Orange light came through the windows. Wyatt stood and lit the lamp. The clean chimney made the light brighter, steadier. "I should get more wood," he said. He went out. Clara sat down in the rocking chair by the fire. Her mother's chair. She'd claimed it without asking. The rockers creaked under her weight. She closed her eyes, heard the door open. Wyatt's footsteps, the clunk of wood being stacked by the fireplace, then humming, low and unconscious, a hymn her mother used to sing while she worked. Clara's eyes snapped open. The humming had come from her own throat. Wyatt stood frozen by the woodpile, his hands full of split logs. He was staring at the wall, but his whole body was listening. Clara stopped. The silence was louder than the song had been. Wyatt stacked the wood, brushed the bark off his hands, moved to his bedroll and sat down, picked up his whittling again. Clara rocked in the chair. The runners creaked. Outside, crickets started their evening song. She was tired enough that her bones ached, but she didn't want to move, didn't want to break whatever this was. Wyatt's knife stopped moving. He looked at the piece of wood in his hands, then at the shelf above the Winchester. He stood, reached up, pulled down a book Clara hadn't noticed. He brought it to her, Little Women. The cover was worn, the spine cracked. Someone had read it many times. "My ma's," he said. "If you want." Clara took the book, opened it. On the inside cover, in careful script, "Property of Clara Sands." "You want me to read it?" "If you're of a mind." She opened to the first page, started reading aloud. Her voice filled the cabin. Wyatt sat down by the fire and picked up his whittling again. But his hands were still. Clara read about the March sisters and their Christmas without presents. Her voice steadied as she read. She glanced up once. Wyatt's eyes were closed. She kept reading, outside. Full dark had fallen. The coyotes had gone silent. Only the crickets sang now. Clara reached the end of the chapter and closed the book. Wyatt opened his eyes. "More tomorrow. If you want." "I do." She stood, moved to the bed, and sat on the edge. The quilt was soft under her hands. Wyatt spread his bedroll by the fire. The same as last night. Clara lay down without undressing, stared at the ceiling. The lamp was still burning. Wyatt turned it down until just a small flame remained. Then he lay down. The cabin creaked as it cooled. The fire popped. Clara was almost asleep when she heard it. So soft she almost missed it. Wyatt was humming. The same hymn she'd hummed earlier, just a few bars. Then silence. Clara's eyes opened in the darkness. He knew it, which meant his mother had sung it too, which meant something in him was remembering how morning came with the rooster's crow. Clara woke to the sound of the door closing. Through the window she could see Wyatt at the pump, splashing water on his face. His shirt was off. His back was scarred 3 long marks across his shoulder blades, old and white. He dried himself with his shirt and pulled it back on. Clara rose and smoothed her dress, found her bonnet and tied it on, went outside. The morning air was cool. Dew silvered the grass. 6 chickens scratched in the dirt by a lean-to she hadn't noticed yesterday. Wyatt was at the fence with the Herefords. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You collect eggs before—" "Yes?" He walked to the lean-to and pushed open the low door. Inside, 4 nests made of straw. They lay mostly here, sometimes under the porch. Clara bent and looked into the first nest. 2 brown eggs, still warm. She cupped them in her hands and placed them carefully in the basket Wyatt held. The second nest had 1 egg, the third, 2 more. The fourth was empty. 6, Wyatt said. "That's good. Some days it's only 3 or 4. He showed her the feed bucket, cracked corn mixed with wheat. "Scatter it wide. They'll fight if you pile it up." Clara took a handful. The grain was rough in her palm. She threw it in an arc across the yard. The chickens came running, wings half spread, clucking and pushing each other. Wyatt watched. "You done this before?" "My father kept chickens. Before—" She stopped, took another handful of feed, scattered it. "Before the bank took the farm." She looked at him. He wasn't looking at her. Was watching the chickens. "Yes," he nodded, took the basket of eggs. "I'll start the fire." They went inside together. Wyatt built up the fire while Clara took the eggs to the table. She found a bowl and cracked them in. 6 eggs, bright yellow yolks, no blood spots, good layers. She ground coffee beans in the hand crank mill while Wyatt brought in more wood. The mill made a rhythmic grinding sound. The smell of fresh coffee filled the cabin. When she was done, she poured the grounds into the pot and added water from the kettle. The coffee boiled. She poured 2 cups and handed one to Wyatt. He drank, closed his eyes. Still can't believe real coffee. Clara wrapped her hands around her cup. The tin was hot, but she didn't let go. They drank in silence. Outside, the sun was rising. Light came through the windows and made bright squares on the clean floor. "Need to ride out and check the north fence," Wyatt said. "Coyote's been testing it. I can manage here. There's beans in the crock, salt pork in the box outside. It's hung high so the varmints can't get it. I'll make supper." He finished his coffee, set the cup down, went to the door and pulled on his boots, took his hat from the peg. "Be back by noon." The door closed, through the window. Clara watched him saddle Buck. He swung up and rode north, sitting easy in the saddle. The horse and rider grew smaller until they disappeared over a rise. Clara washed the cups and the skillet from yesterday. While her hands were in the water, she thought about supper. Beans would take hours to cook. She could start them now. She found the crock of beans, poured half into a pot and covered them with water, set the pot on the fire, found the box outside a wooden chest hung from the eaves on rope. Inside was salt pork wrapped in cheesecloth. She cut 3 thick slices and added them to the beans. The cabin was clean, but it still felt empty. Clara went outside and walked around the property, found wild herbs growing by the fence sage, and what looked like wild thyme. She picked some and brought them inside. Found a mason jar on the shelf, and filled it with water from the pump. Put the herbs in the jar and set it on the table. There were black-eyed Susans growing at the edge of the garden. She picked a handful and added them to the jar. Yellow flowers against green sage. She swept the floor even though she'd scrubbed it yesterday. The cabin was as clean as she could make it. So she sat down at the table and opened her sewing kit. Found the brown calico dress hanging by the bed. Examined it. 2 buttons missing. Hem coming loose. A tear in the sleeve. She threaded a needle with brown thread. Started on the hem. Small. Even stitches. The way her mother had taught her. The needle moved in and out. The thread pulled tight. The beans bubbled on the fire. The cabin smelled like salt pork and sage. Clara sewed. When the hem was done, she started on the sleeve. The tear was 3 inches long. She turned it inside and made a flat felled seam. She was sewing on the 2nd button when she heard hoofbeats. Looked out the window. Not Wyatt. A boy came up the road on a mule, maybe 13, gangly and sunburnt. He had a burlap sack tied to the saddle. Clara stepped onto the porch. The boy pulled up. Looked at her. Looked away quick. His face went red. "Delivery from Holcomb's," he said to the mule's ears. "Mr. Sands is out checking fence. I can just leave it here." He swung down, untied the sack, 50 pounds of flour, set it on the porch, kept his eyes on the ground. "Thank you," Clara said. The boy nodded. Started to climb back on the mule. Stopped. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "There," he stopped, swallowed. "Folks in town. They're saying things." Clara's hands tightened on the porch rail. "What things?" The boy's face got redder. "I ain't supposed to. Mama said not to say nothing, but—" He looked up at her finally. "They're saying you and Mr. Sands, or that you're—" His voice dropped to a whisper. "That it ain't proper. You living here, without being married." Clara's breath caught. I didn't mean I wasn't. The boy was talking fast now, words tumbling out. It's just what they're saying. Mrs. Pettigrew, mostly, and some others. I don't think it's right, them talking like that. But I thought you should know, so you could, I don't know, fix it maybe. He climbed on the mule and kicked it hard, rode off fast down the road. Clara stood on the porch. The flour sack sat at her feet. Her hands were shaking. She went inside, sat down at the table, picked up her sewing but couldn't focus on it. The needle kept slipping. She set it down. The beans needed stirring. She stirred them, added more water, sat back down. The afternoon stretched long. The sun moved across the sky. Clara tried to read, but the words blurred. Tried to sew, but her stitches were crooked. Finally, she just sat in the rocking chair and rocked. When Wyatt came back, the sun was low. He unsaddled Buck and came in carrying something wrapped in canvas, set it on the table, unwrapped it. Prairie chicken, already cleaned and plucked. Shot it on the way back, he said. Thought you might want something besides beans. Clara stood, looked at the bird, looked at him. Folks are talking. His hands stopped moving. What folks? The boy who brought the flour? He said. She swallowed. He said people are saying we're living in sin, that it ain't proper. Wyatt was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Reckon they would say that. Does it bother you? Does it bother you? I asked first. He looked at her. We could go see Reverend Michaels. Make it proper. Clara's throat tightened. Is that what you want? Want you to feel safe? I do feel safe. Then we wait, he said. Let them talk. He went back outside. Clara prepared the chicken, rubbed it with salt and some of the sage from the jar. Found a cast-iron pot with a lid. The bird just fit. She nestled it in and set it on the fire. They ate on the porch. Wyatt had brought out both chairs. They sat side by side, plates on their laps, watching the prairie. The chicken was tender. The beans had cooked down to creamy softness. A meadowlark sang from the fence post. The Herefords grazed, their white faces bright in the sun. Why Herefords? Clara asked. Wyatt chewed slowly, swallowed. Hardy, white faces make them easy to count at a distance, and they do all right on prairie grass. Don't need much. How long you been here? 3 years? And before? He was quiet. The rocking chair creaked under Clara. She waited. Kansas, he said finally. Abilene, mostly. She wanted to ask more, didn't. They sat in silence. The sun touched the horizon. Orange light spread across the prairie. That evening, after the dishes were done, Clara lit the lamp and took down Little Women. She sat in the rocking chair. Wyatt sat on the floor by the fire, piece of willow in his hands and his knife. She read about Joe cutting her hair, about Meg at the dance. Her voice filled the cabin. She glanced up once. Wyatt's knife had stopped moving. He was looking at the wood in his hands. She could see what it was now. A spoon. Smooth handle. Deep bowl. She kept reading. Didn't mention the spoon. When she finished the chapter, she closed the book. Wyatt stood and set the spoon on the table. Didn't say anything. Went to his bedroll. Clara ran her thumb over the handle. The wood was smooth as water. every curve deliberate. She set it with her other things on the shelf. That night, she lay in the dark and listened to Wyatt breathe, listened to the house settle. She was almost asleep when she heard it, not humming this time. Words, so quiet she almost missed them. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Wyatt's voice, rough from disuse, but carrying the melody. Clara's eyes opened. She didn't move, barely breathed. He sang the whole first verse, then stopped, in the silence that followed. Clara realized he wasn't just remembering the hymn. He was teaching himself to sing again, because she had reminded him what it sounded like. Sunday morning. Clara heated water in the kettle and washed her hair in rainwater she'd collected in the barrel outside. The water was soft, made her hair slip between her fingers. She scrubbed her scalp with a sliver of soap until her arms ached. Rinsed it 3 times, wrung it out, and sat by the fire to let it dry. Wyatt was outside, shaving. She could see him through the window, leather strop in one hand, straight razor in the other. He scraped the blade down his jaw, rinsed it in the basin, scraped again. When he was done, he splashed water on his face and dried it with his shirt. Clara braided her hair while it was still damp, twisted it up, and pinned it tight against her head. Put on her gray wool dress, the only one that wasn't work-stained. The white collar was detachable. She'd starched it yesterday with water and a bit of flour. It stood crisp against the dark fabric. Wyatt came in carrying a suit jacket, too small through the shoulders. The sleeves were short on his arms. "Reverend Michaels loaned it," he said. "For church." He pulled it on. The buttons barely closed across his chest. He tugged at the collar. "You don't have to wear it," Clara said. "I do." They walked to town, 7 miles. The sun climbed as they walked. By the time they reached the white church with its cracked bell tower, Clara's dress was dark with sweat under the arms. Wyatt's borrowed jacket had dust on the shoulders from the road. The church bell was ringing. People streamed toward the doors. Women in their Sunday best. Bustles exaggerated in the latest fashion. Men in clean shirts. Watch chains glinting. Children scrubbed and combed. The crowd saw them coming. The stream of people slowed, stopped. Everyone turned to look. Clara's steps faltered. Wyatt's hand touched the small of her back, just briefly, steadying. They walked to the church steps. The crowd parted, actually parted, bodies moving aside to let them through but not too close. Inside, the pews were filling. The murmur of voices died when Clara and Wyatt entered. Every head turned. Clara could feel the eyes, feel the weight of them. The pews were full, or they became full. People who'd been leaving space suddenly moved together, filled the gaps. Clara walked down the aisle. Every row was packed. No room, no space, except the very back. The last pew was empty. They sat. The wood was hard under Clara. The bench creaked. Behind them, the door kept opening. People kept coming in, but no one sat in their pew. The space around them stayed empty. Reverend Michaels came out from the back. He was old, white-haired, bent in the shoulders, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at the congregation, looked at Clara and Wyatt alone in the back. His mouth tightened. He opened his Bible. From the Gospel of Matthew. Judge not, that ye be not judged. His voice carried, strong despite his age. He read the whole passage, then closed the Bible and looked out at the pews. I've been pastor of this church for 32 years, he said. And I've seen a lot of judging in that time. Most of it wrong. Mrs. Pettigrew shifted in her seat. Third row. Right side. Her daughter sat next to her, maybe 16. Eyes wide. The Lord tells us to help the stranger, Reverend Michael said. To feed the hungry, to shelter those who have no home. Some of you have forgotten that. More shifting. Feet scraping on the floor. I visited the Sands place twice now, he continued. I saw two people living decent, treating each other with respect, working hard. That's what I saw. The back of Mrs. Pettigrew's neck was red. Clara could see it from where she sat. Now let us sing. Hymn number 47. Amazing Grace. The congregation stood. Hymnals rustled. Clara found the page. The organ wheezed into life, Mrs. Henderson at the keys, fingers stiff with arthritis. The singing started. Clara sang. Her voice was small at first, then steadied. The words came without thinking. She'd sung this hymn 1,000 times. Wyatt stood beside her. Silent. He held the hymnal, but didn't look at it. Didn't open his mouth. The hymn ended. They sat for the sermon. Reverend Michael spoke about the Good Samaritan, about helping those the world had passed by. His words were pointed. Several people looked uncomfortable. After the benediction, the congregation filed out. Clara and Wyatt waited until everyone else had left. When they stood, Reverend Michaels was waiting at the door. Miss Brennan, Mr. Sands. He shook both their hands. His grip was firm. You're welcome here. Don't forget that. Thank you. Reverend, Clara said. Outside, the congregation had gathered in clusters on the lawn. Women with their parasols up against the sun, men smoking and talking, children running between the adults. The conversation stopped when Clara and Wyatt came out. Every eye turned to them. They walked down the steps. The crowd didn't part this time. Blocked the path. Not deliberately, or maybe it was deliberate. Hard to tell. People just standing there, not moving. Wyatt walked forward. People stepped back. He didn't push, didn't say anything, just walked, and they moved. Clara followed. She kept her eyes down. Watched her feet on the grass, one step, another. They made it through the crowd, started down the road toward Holcomb's Mercantile. They needed thread, buttons, things Clara couldn't make herself. The Mercantile was open, Sunday afternoon, just for an hour after church. Holcomb stood behind the counter, apron tied around his waist. He nodded when they came in. Morning, Miss Clara, Wyatt. Need some thread, Clara said. And buttons if you have them. Over on the left, help yourself. Clara went to the shelf. Spools of thread in different colors. She picked white, brown, black, found a card of horn buttons, 5 cents. The door opened behind them. Mrs. Pettigrew came in with her daughter. Saw Clara and Wyatt. Her mouth pinched. Holcomb, I need... She stopped. Looked at Clara. Her voice got louder. I need that bolt of calico. The blue one. Yes, ma'am. Holcomb started measuring. Mrs. Pettigrew moved closer to where Clara stood. close enough that Clara could smell her perfume. Lavender water. Too much of it. "Decent folk have standards," Mrs. Pettigrew said. Not to Clara, to the air, to anyone listening. "But I suppose some people weren't raised to know better." Clara's hand shook on the thread spool. She set it down carefully, picked up another. Her daughter tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, hush, Sarah." Wyatt stepped between them. Didn't touch Mrs. Pettigrew. Just moved so he blocked her view of Clara. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was quiet. "Don't ma'am me." Wyatt didn't answer. Just stood there. Mrs. Pettigrew's face got redder. She looked at Holcomb. "I'll take my fabric." Holcomb wrapped it. Mrs. Pettigrew paid and swept out. Her daughter followed. But not before glancing back at Clara. The girl's face held something that might have been sympathy. The door closed. Holcomb cleared his throat. "Don't mind her. She's been different since her husband passed. Going on 2 years now. Some folks, grief makes them hard." Clara paid with coins from her small purse. Her hands were still shaking. Outside, the sun was brutal. The walk home stretched ahead of them, 7 miles. Clara's feet were already blistering in her Sunday boots. They walked, neither spoke. The town fell behind. The prairie opened up around them. Heat shimmered off the ground. A mile passed. Then another. At the 3rd mile, Clara stopped, just stopped walking and stood there in the road. Wyatt turned, looked at her. "You'll regret this," Clara said. "Regret what? Me taking me in. They'll never let you forget." "Don't much care what they think." "You should. You live here. So do you. Now." Clara's eyes filled. The tears came fast. Hot. Unstoppable. She tried to stop them. Couldn't. Her shoulders shook. "Don't!" Wyatt took a step toward her. Stopped. His hands hung at his sides. "Don't do that. I ruined your life. You saved it." She looked up. The tears blurred her vision, but she could see his face. "What? Hadn't talked to another soul in 3 years. Not really. You—" He stopped. Swallowed. Started again. "You gave me a reason to—" He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. White linen, folded square, handed it to her. Clara took it, pressed it to her face. The fabric was soft, worn thin with washing. She could see letters embroidered in the corner. W.S. in careful stitches. "Your mother made this," she said. "Long time ago." Clara wiped her eyes, folded the handkerchief, tried to hand it back. "Keep it," Wyatt said. They stood in the road. The sun beat down. Grasshoppers buzzed in the grass. Far off, a dust devil spun itself into nothing. "We should go," Wyatt said. "Long walk yet?" They started walking again, this time after a few yards. His hand found hers, just briefly. His palm was rough, calloused. His fingers squeezed once, then let go. But Clara could still feel it, the warmth of his hand, the steadiness of it. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was setting. Orange and purple streaked the sky. Clara's feet were bleeding inside her boots. Wyatt's borrowed jacket was soaked with sweat. They went inside. Clara lit the lamp. Wyatt pulled off the jacket and hung it carefully on a peg. They stood there in the lamplight, too tired to speak. Then Clara noticed it, on the table, a piece of paper folded once. She picked it up, unfolded it. The writing was rough. Unpracticed town council requests your presence. Tuesday evening. Matter of community standards. Clara's hands went cold. She looked at Wyatt. He took the paper. Read it. His face went hard. They can't make us leave, Clara said. Can they? Wyatt set the paper down, looked at it for a long moment. Reckon we'll find out Tuesday. Monday passed in silence. Tuesday came. Clara made breakfast, but neither of them ate much. The biscuits sat on their plates, untouched. The coffee went cold in their cups. By evening, the sky had darkened. Not with sunset too early for that. Clouds were building in the west, black and heavy. The air pressure dropped. Clara could feel it in her chest, making it hard to breathe. Wyatt secured the shutters, brought in extra wood, checked the chickens were in their lean-to. The wind picked up, hot and dry, smelling of dust and distant rain. Storm's coming, he said. Clara nodded. She'd been watching the clouds build all afternoon. The first drops hit the tin roof just as darkness fell. Big drops, loud as stones, then more, then a downpour that made the cabin shake. Lightning cracked, illuminating everything for a split second: the table, the fireplace, Wyatt standing at the window. Then darkness again. Thunder rolled, the cabin rattled. A tin plate fell off the shelf and clattered across the floor. Clara lay on the bed, still dressed, stared at the ceiling. The rain drummed overhead, drowning out everything else. She tried to sleep, couldn't. Her mind kept going back to the note. Community standards. What did that mean? Would they run them out? Make them leave lightning again? The whole room lit up white. She could see Wyatt on his bedroll by the fire. He was sitting up, arms wrapped around his knees. Thunder crashed directly overhead. The cabin shook. Clara sat up. I can't sleep. Wyatt turned his head. In the darkness, she could barely see him, just the shape of him. Me neither, he said. She stood, moved to the table, felt her way to a chair, sat down. Her hands were shaking, and it wasn't from cold. Wyatt stood and lit the lamp, turned the flame low, just enough to see by. He sat in the other chair. The rain hammered the roof. Water was leaking somewhere. She could hear it dripping into a bucket in the corner. Clara's throat was tight. I should tell you why I came west. You don't have to. Want to. Lightning flashed. She saw his face clearly for a moment. Saw him waiting. Papa lost the farm, she said. Bank foreclosed. He'd borrowed against it 3 years before when the crops failed. Couldn't make the payments. They gave him 30 days to clear out. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. The wood was rough under her palms. He died 2 days after they came for the land. Doctor said his heart. But it wasn't his heart. It was shame. The kind that kills you from the inside. Thunder rumbled. Longer this time. Mama was already gone. Fever took her 3 years back. I had nothing. No money, no family, no prospects. She stopped, swallowed. Her mouth was dry. There were men in town, men who'd look at me a certain way. Offer me work at the Silver Dollar, like it was respectable. Like I wouldn't know what they meant. The rain eased slightly. She could hear her own breathing now, fast and shallow. I'm not stupid, she said. I knew what I'd become if I stayed. So I answered an advertisement, mail order bride. 3 men wrote back. I picked Hiram Cadell because his letter sounded kind. He said he wanted a partner. Lightning illuminated the cabin. She saw Wyatt's face. He wasn't looking away. I told him I had $500. I lied. Told him my father had left me a sewing machine. Another lie. I thought... Her voice cracked. I thought if I could just get here, he'd see I was willing to work. See I was worth keeping even without the money. She was crying now, not gentle tears. Hard, ugly crying that made her shoulders shake and her breath come in gasps. But I'm not worth keeping, she said. That's what he saw. That's what everyone sees. I'm nothing. I'm a liar who came here with empty hands. I sold myself for a train ticket and I didn't even have the decency to be honest about it. The shame was physical. It sat in her stomach like something rotten. Made her want to curl up and disappear. Wyatt stood, came around the table. She thought he'd leave, thought he'd walk away. Instead, he pulled the handkerchief from his pocket, the one his mother made, handed it to her. Clara took it, pressed it to her face, sobbed into it. The fabric grew wet. She couldn't stop, couldn't control it. All the shame and fear came pouring out. When she finally quieted, her face was swollen, her nose was running. She was disgusting. Wyatt sat back down, put his hands flat on the table, looked at them. I killed a man in Abilene, he said. Clara's head came up. 5 years ago. Spring roundup. I was working cattle for a ranch outside town. Went into the saloon one night. There was a gambler. He accused me of looking at his cards. I wasn't. But he stood up and drew. His hands tightened into fists on the table. I was faster. One shot. He went down, dead before he hit the floor. Thunder rolled again. Farther away now. The storm was moving east. It was legal. Self-defense. Witnesses said so. Sheriff didn't even hold me. But the dead man's brother came looking 2 weeks later. Same thing. He drew. I shot. Then his cousin came. Then 2 friends. Then someone who said I'd insulted him by killing his kin. His voice was flat. Dead. 5 men in 3 years. All legal, all fair fights. All because I couldn't miss. Because I was fast, and I never hesitated. And the worst part... He stopped, started again. The worst part is I liked it. For a while. Liked being feared. Liked being the one nobody crossed. He looked up at her. His eyes were wet. I'm a killer. Clara. The law called it self-defense, but I'm still a killer. I've got blood on my hands that won't wash off. And the reason I'm here, the reason I sleep on that floor every night, is because I'm scared. Scared that if I let myself want something, if I let myself have something, I'll become that man again. His voice broke. That's what I am. That's what you took in. A man who killed 5 people and hasn't forgiven himself for any of them. The lamp flickered. Rain pattered softer now. The storm was dying. Clara reached across the table, put her hand over his. His skin was cold. He flinched, but didn't pull away. You're not that man, she said. How do you know? Because that man wouldn't have helped me, wouldn't sleep on the floor, wouldn't care about a woman with nothing to give. He turned his hand over, his palm pressed against hers, his fingers curled around her hand, held tight. You're not nothing, he said, and you're not a liar. You're someone who tried to survive. Then neither are you. Thunder crashed one last time, far away. The rain gentled to a patter. The air smelled clean now, washed. They sat there, hands clasped across the scarred pine table, while the storm moved off into darkness. The lamp burned low. Outside, the prairie drank the rain, and the parched earth softened. Clara looked at their joined hands, looked at the man sitting across from her. She opened her mouth to say something, she didn't know what, but Wyatt's head snapped toward the window. His hand tightened on hers. He stood, moved to the window, looked out through the gap in the shutter, didn't move for a long time. Then, "We got company." Clara stood. Her legs felt weak. "Who?" Wyatt stayed at the window. His whole body was rigid. "Don't know. But they're riding in from town. More than one." Clara moved beside him, looked out, in the darkness. She could see them. Riders. 5, maybe 6. Moving slow up the muddy road. And they were carrying torches. The hoofbeats stopped outside. Clara heard boots hitting mud. Voices. Low and male. The smell of torch smoke drifted through the cracks in the shutters. Wyatt moved to the door. His hand went to the latch. "Don't," Clara said. "Have to." He opened the door. 6 men stood in the yard, torches burning despite the rain. Sheriff Burrell in front, water streaming off his hat. Behind him, 3 members of the town council, and Hiram Cadell, arms crossed, face hard. "Evening, Wyatt," Sheriff Burrell said. Wyatt stepped onto the porch. Clara moved to stand behind him in the doorway. "What's this about council meeting? Tonight? Figure you got the notice." "Said Tuesday evening. This is Tuesday night? Storm just—" "Meetings at the schoolhouse! Now!" Sheriff Burrell shifted his weight. "Council's assembled, waiting on you. In the middle of the night. Ain't the middle of the night, just past 8. "You rode out here with torches," Wyatt said. "In the rain? To make sure we came?" Sheriff Burrell looked uncomfortable. "Council wanted to be certain." "You mean Cadell wanted to be certain?" Cadell stepped forward. "You'll come peaceful or otherwise. Makes no difference to me." Wyatt's jaw tightened. His hands flexed. Clara could see the tension in his shoulders, could see him calculating. 6 men, 6 against 1. And if he fought, if he even looked like he might, they'd have proof he was dangerous. Clara stepped forward, put her hand on Wyatt's arm. "We'll come," she said. Wyatt looked at her. She met his eyes, shook her head slightly. His shoulders dropped. "Give us a minute." "We'll wait," Sheriff Burrell said. Wyatt closed the door, turned to Clara. "They want to fight," he said. "Want me to give them a reason? Then don't. What if they— we face it, together." She went to the bed and picked up her shawl. Wool. Worn thin but still warm, wrapped it around her shoulders. Her hands were shaking, but she made them still. Wyatt pulled on his jacket. The borrowed one, still damp from Sunday. He reached under the floorboard. Clara's breath caught. But he didn't take out the gun, just left his hand there for a moment, then pulled it back, empty. They went outside. The rain had stopped, but everything dripped, water from the eaves, water from the trees. The torches hissed and smoked. "We'll walk," Wyatt said. "Don't need an escort." "Council wants us to make sure you arrive," Sheriff Burrell said. So they walked, 7 miles to town, the 6 men on horses riding alongside, torches lighting the muddy road. Clara's boots were soaked before they'd gone half a mile. Her dress hem dragged in the mud, getting heavier with every step. No one spoke. Just the sound of hooves squelching in mud, water dripping, torches crackling. The town appeared ahead. Windows lit. More people than usual for this hour. The schoolhouse glowed brightest, every lamp burning. A crowd had gathered outside. 40 people, maybe more. They turned when they saw the torches coming. Saw Wyatt and Clara walking between the mounted men. The murmur started, grew louder. Sheriff Burrell dismounted. "Make way!" The crowd parted. Clara walked through. She could feel their eyes, hear the whispers. Her face burned, but she kept her chin up, kept walking. Inside. The schoolhouse was packed, benches full, people standing along the walls. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and coal oil fumes from too many lamps burning at once. 5 men sat at a table in front the town council. 3 she didn't know. 1 was Holcomb from the Mercantile. The last was Hiram Cadell. Mrs. Pettigrew sat in the front row, back straight, face set. Every seat was taken except 2 chairs in the middle of the room, facing the council. Clara and Wyatt walked to them, sat down. Clara folded her hands in her lap to hide the shaking. The council head, a man with gray mutton chops, stood. "This hearing is called to address concerns raised by community members regarding improper cohabitation and moral conduct." "This ain't a trial," Sheriff Burrell said from the back. "Just a hearing?" "Just a hearing," Mutton Chops agreed. "Mr. Cadell, you raised the initial complaint. You may speak." Cadell stood, turned to face the crowd. Not Clara and Wyatt. "I think it's clear to everyone what's going on," he said. "I brought a woman to this town in good faith. A woman who made promises she didn't keep. I had every right to refuse her. And what happens? This man takes her off the platform. And now they're living under the same roof. Unmarried. It's indecent." Murmurs of agreement from the crowd. "It sets a bad example," Cadell continued. "Makes decent people uncomfortable." He sat down, looked satisfied. Mutton Chops turned to Wyatt. "Mr. Sands, how do you answer?" Wyatt stood. "She needed help. I gave it. And you're living together. Unmarried. I sleep on the floor. She sleeps in the bed. Separate. That's your testimony. It's the truth." Mutton Chops looked at Clara. "Miss Brennan, do you have anything to add?" Clara's throat was tight. She tried to swallow. Couldn't. Everyone was staring. Waiting. She could feel the judgment like a weight on her chest. She stood. Her legs shook, but held. "Mr. Cadell is right about one thing," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I made promises I couldn't keep. I lied about having money, about the sewing machine. I was desperate." The room was silent. My father had just died. My mother was already gone. I had nothing, no family, no home. Men in my town suggested I could find work at establishments like the Silver Dollar. Several women shifted in their seats. I thought if I could get here, if I could show I was willing to work, it would be enough. But Mr. Cadell wanted goods, not a person. And when I couldn't deliver those goods, he made it clear I was worth nothing. As she looked at the crowd, at all of them. So yes, I was standing on that platform with empty hands, and most of you stood there too, laughing, making suggestions about where I could go, what I could do. Several men looked down. Mr. Sands didn't laugh. He offered me shelter, food, safety. He asked nothing in return, He's been nothing but decent and Christian in his conduct. She turned to Cadell. You say we're living improper. I ask you what's improper about kindness, about giving shelter to someone with nowhere to go. Isn't that what the good book teaches? Cadell's face went red. Clara looked at the council. I'm not property to be returned. I'm a person. Mr. Sands treated me as such. If that's wrong in your eyes, then I don't understand your Christianity. She sat down. Her whole body was shaking. She'd said too much. Been too bold. They'd run her out now. Silence. Complete silence. Then Wyatt stood. I've been thinking, he said. His voice was rough. About what's proper and what ain't. He turned to Clara, looked directly at her. I ain't asking because they say I should. I ain't asking to make things proper. I'm asking because I want to. Clara's breath stopped. Will you marry me? The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs. Mrs. Pettigrew's fan snapped shut. Clara stared at him, at his face, at the way he wasn't looking at anyone else. What? I'm asking, not because of them, because of you, because the cabin smells like coffee now, because I hear you humming while you work, because you made me remember what it's like to have someone to come home to. His hands were clenched at his sides. I know I ain't much. I know I got a past. But if you'll have me, I'll spend every day trying to be worth it. Clara's eyes filled. You are worth it. Is that a yes? She nodded. Couldn't speak, just nodded. The back door opened. Reverend Michaels came in, shaking rain from his coat. Heard there was a meeting. Thought I should attend. He walked to the front, looked at the council, at Clara and Wyatt. I've been to their home twice now, he said. I see two people living decent, working hard, treating each other with Christian respect. That's more than I can say for some marriages in this town that nobody questions. He looked directly at Mrs. Pettigrew. She flinched. If there's objection to them marrying, speak now. Reverend Michaels said, Otherwise, I'll perform the ceremony Sunday, 2 o'clock. Anyone who wants to witness is welcome. Mutton Chops cleared his throat. Council needs to vote. Vote on what? Reverend Michaels asked. On whether two people can marry. That's between them and their conscience. Holcomb stood. I vote we adjourn. Let the Reverend handle this. One by one. The other council members nodded, even Cadell, though his face was dark. Meeting adjourned, Mutton Chop said. The crowd began filing out. Some looked disappointed. Some looked relieved. Mrs. Pettigrew stood stiffly and left without looking at anyone. But her daughter stopped by Clara's chair, leaned down, and whispered. That took courage. What you said. Then she was gone, hurrying after her mother. Clara and Wyatt stood, walked to where Reverend Michaels waited. Sunday, he said. 2 o'clock. Be there. Outside. The night was clear. The storm had washed everything clean. Stars filled the sky. Clara and Wyatt walked down the schoolhouse steps. At the bottom, Clara stumbled. Wyatt caught her arm, steadied her. His hand stayed there, then slid down to her hand. Their fingers intertwined. They walked through town like that, hand in hand. The first time they'd touched deliberately. Publicly. No one stopped them. But Clara could feel eyes watching from windows. The road stretched ahead. 7 miles home. Clara's feet ached. Her dress was caked with mud. But Wyatt's hand was warm in hers. Did you mean it? She asked. What you said in there. Every word. Even the part about, especially that. They walked in silence for a while. The stars wheeled overhead. A coyote called from far off. "I don't have a ring," Wyatt said. "Don't need one." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. Once, twice. "Sunday's coming fast," he said. Clara looked up at him, at his profile against the stars. "Reckon it is," she said. They walked on into the darkness. Behind them. The town's lights grew smaller. Ahead, their cabin waited. Whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. Sunday morning. Clara woke before dawn. The rooster hadn't crowed yet. The cabin was dark except for gray light seeping through the shutters. She lay still, listening to Wyatt breathe on his bedroll by the fire. Today, she would marry him. Her hands were cold despite the warmth of the quilt. She sat up. The rope bed creaked. Wyatt stirred, but didn't wake. Clara went to the water barrel outside. The air was cool, damp with dew. She filled the kettle and brought it inside, built up the fire, set the kettle on to heat. While the water warmed, she took down her blue calico dress, the one she'd arrived in. She'd washed it twice, mended the tear in the sleeve, sewed on new buttons. It was still faded, but it was clean. It was hers. She unpinned her hair and brushed it out, 100 strokes, the way her mother had taught her. The brush caught on tangles. She worked them free patiently. The water was hot. She poured it into the basin and washed her face, her neck, her hands. Used the sliver of soap until her skin felt raw and clean. Dried herself with a flour sack towel. She braided her hair while it was still damp. Twisted it into a coil at the base of her neck. Pinned it tight. Found the broken ribbon from her bonnet and worked it through the braid. Blue to match the dress. Wyatt woke. Sat up. Looked at her standing by the basin in her chemise, with her hair pinned up. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He stood, rolled up his bedroll, went outside. Clara heard the pump working, heard him splashing water. When he came back in, his hair was wet, slicked back from his face. He'd shaved again, cut himself on the jaw a small nick. Blood dried dark. He pulled on his cleanest shirt. Brown cotton, worn soft. His only pair of pants without patches. No jacket, he'd returned the borrowed one to Reverend Michael's. Clara put on the blue dress, buttoned it up the front. 22 buttons. Her fingers shook on the last few. Wyatt came over and finished them for her. His hands were steady. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. Stepped back. Clara looked around the cabin. At the quilt on the bed. The organized shelves. The lamp with its clean chimney. The wooden spoon Wyatt had carved, sitting with her other things. "We should go," she said. Wyatt picked up his hat. Clara picked up the wildflower bouquet she'd made yesterday, black-eyed Susans, and prairie grass tied with twine. The flowers were already wilting, but they'd last through the ceremony. They walked. 7 miles. The sun climbed as they walked. By the time they reached town, Clara's dress was damp with sweat. Wyatt's shirt had dark patches under the arms. The church bell was ringing. 2 o'clock. They were exactly on time. People were gathered on the lawn, more than Clara expected. 50, maybe. Most of the town. They turned when Clara and Wyatt approached. No one said anything. Just watched. Waited. Clara and Wyatt walked up the church steps. Reverend Michaels stood at the door in his black coat, Bible in hand. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," Wyatt said. They went inside. The church was half full. People in the back pews. The front was empty. Clara and Wyatt walked down the aisle. Their footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. Sheriff Burrell stood at the front. He nodded at them. "Reverend asked me to witness." "Obliged," Wyatt said. Reverend Michaels opened his Bible. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of our Lord to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Clara barely heard the words. Her heart was beating too hard, too fast. She looked at Wyatt. He was looking at her. His jaw was tight. His eyes were steady. "Do you, Wyatt Sands, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." His voice was clear, strong. "Do you, Clara Brennan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Clara's throat was tight. "I do. The ring." Wyatt pulled something from his pocket. A gold band. Simple, plain, no stones. He slipped it onto Clara's finger. It was warm from being in his pocket, a little loose, but it stayed on. "I pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride." Wyatt looked at Clara. She looked at him. Neither moved. Then he leaned forward. His lips touched hers, brief, chaste. His mouth was dry. So was hers. He pulled back. His ears were red. The congregation clapped. Not everyone, but enough. The sound filled the church. They walked back down the aisle. Hand in hand now, married. Clara could feel the weight of the ring on her finger, could feel everyone watching. Outside, people had set up a table. Food appeared: potato salad in a crock, biscuits wrapped in cloth, a jar of lemonade with a dipper. Women brought plates. Men shook Wyatt's hand. Awkwardly. Briefly. But they did it. Holcomb brought a sack. "Wedding gift, sugar, coffee, flour." "Much obliged," Wyatt said. Mrs. Pettigrew's daughter approached with a pie. Apple, from the smell. She held it out to Clara. "I made this," she said. Quiet. "For you. Thank you," Clara said. The girl glanced back. Mrs. Pettigrew stood by the church, arms crossed, but she wasn't leaving, just standing there, watching. The girl leaned closer, whispered, "What you said Tuesday. That took courage." Then she hurried back to her mother. More gifts appeared. A quilt from the ladies' quilting circle, a jar of preserves, a packet of seeds, tomatoes, beans, squash, things for planting. Clara's eyes burned. She blinked hard. They stayed an hour, ate potato salad and biscuits, drank lemonade that was tart and cold. People came up to congratulate them, not everyone, but enough. When the sun started to sink, Wyatt loaded the gifts into Sheriff Burrell's wagon. The sheriff had offered to drive them home. "Save you the walk," he said. They climbed into the back, sat on the wagon bed with the gifts around them. The wagon rolled out of town. The church grew smaller behind them. Clara looked at Wyatt. He looked at her. His hand found hers. Squeezed. "Mrs. Sands," he said, Her throat tightened. "Mr. Sands!" The wagon rattled over the prairie road. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple and gold. The temperature dropped. Clara shivered. Wyatt moved closer, put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, felt his warmth, his solidity, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. The cabin appeared ahead, small, weathered. Smoke rising from the chimney where they'd left the fire banked that morning. Sheriff Burrell stopped the wagon, helped unload the gifts. "Congratulations," he said, tipped his hat, and drove away. Clara and Wyatt carried the gifts inside, set them on the table. The cabin smelled like wood smoke and coffee and home. Wyatt went back outside, came back with something wrapped in wet burlap. A rose cutting, small, with a few leaves. "Reverend's wife sent it," he said. "Said every home ought to have a rose bush." They went outside. The light was fading fast now. Clara found a spot by the front wall, sheltered from the wind. Wyatt dug the hole with his hands, deep enough that the roots would take. Clara unwrapped the cutting and placed it in the hole. They filled in the dirt together, patted it down. Wyatt brought water from the pump. They watered it until the ground was dark. "Think it'll grow?" Clara asked. "It'll grow?" They went back inside, lit the lamp, made supper from the food people had brought: potato salad, biscuits, a slice of apple pie, ate at the table. Clara kept looking at the ring on her finger, kept turning it. The gold caught the lamplight. When the dishes were done, Wyatt went to the corner, pulled out something Clara hadn't seen before. A second rocking chair. Pine. Like his mother's. Hand-hewn. The joints were tight. The rockers were smooth. "Made it," he said. "Last few weeks. In the barn, after you went to sleep." Clara ran her hand over the arm. The wood was smooth as water. Every curve deliberate. He'd made this for her. Had been making it since she arrived. "It's beautiful," she said. They carried both chairs onto the porch, set them side by side, sat down. The rockers creaked in rhythm, slow, steady. The stars were coming out. The crickets were singing. Far off, a coyote called. Another answered. Clara reached over, found Wyatt's hand. He took it, their fingers intertwined. "You happy?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time. The chairs rocked. The stars brightened. "Reckon so," he said. "You, I am." The prairie stretched around them. Endless. Dark. But not empty. Above them, the sky was full of stars. More than Clara had ever seen. They wheeled slowly overhead. Ancient and constant. Wyatt's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Once, twice. The chairs rocked. The crickets sang. Inside the cabin, on the mantel. The tintypes stood together now. His mother, her parents, all of them together, seemed right. Somehow. Clara closed her eyes, felt the night air on her face, felt Wyatt's hand in hers, felt the weight of the gold ring, felt the solid wood of the chair beneath her, made by his hands for her to sit in. She opened her eyes, looked at the stars, then at Wyatt. He was looking at her. Neither spoke. No words were needed. The chairs rocked on. There's something quiet that sits with us after a story like this. Not resolved, exactly. Just there. The kind of feeling that's familiar if you've ever stood at a crossroads and wondered if choosing kindness would cost you everything you'd built. Or if you've ever been the one left standing on a platform, holding nothing but yourself, hoping that would be enough. Many of us have known what it's like to be seen differently once the world decides who we are. To carry something in silence because speaking it aloud might break what little we still have. Wyatt and Clara. They didn't fix each other. They just stopped carrying their weight alone. And maybe that's closer to how we actually get by than we talk about. The story doesn't need to teach us anything. It's allowed to just sit there, unresolved in places, tender in others, like most real things are. We don't have to extract meaning from it or decide what it all meant. It's okay to let it rest. Thank you for staying, for listening all the way through.